Snap, Crackle, Pop with your host, Leslie Lugosi. Thanks for listening.
Hey, this is Leslie Lugosi. Thanks for tuning in to episode 3 of Snap, Crackle, Pop. Today I get to hang out with two of the original members from the band PYLON from Athens, Georgia, drummer Curtis Crowe and singer Vanessa Briscoe Hay. They're going to share some fun stories and also give some advice if you want to get into the music industry. So how did you meet and how did PYLON come together?
I had a group of friends I was living with out in the country, and way out in the country. We had this great old house, and it was surrounded by pecan orchard and beautiful, serene place. And it turned out it was also a great place for the B-52s to play. And Curtis Knapp, he was a photographer and friend of theirs, and came out to the house and was like, y'all should have the Bees play here. They need a place to play before they go to New York. Okay, I'd heard of them, I just never heard them. Everybody, there's buzz around town. We all knew about them. So anyway, they came out to our house and played at the house. The next day, they packed up and went to New York and got famous, and that was the last we saw them for a while. So shortly after that, our house, we sublet our house, which we were not supposed to do. That was a kind of strictly forbidden in our lease arrangement to sublease the house. So we conveniently ignored that, sublet the house, and Bill and I found ourselves homeless. Yeah, so anyway, we were downtown hanging out, trying to figure out what we were going to do. Fall was setting in. We were about to, be homeless. And what are we going to do? And we see this guy dragging a trash can full of dirt out of this building downtown. And it's just filthy dirty. But he's happy as he can be. And we're in a beautiful old building. We're looking at this building. And, hey, man, what's the story of this building here? And he goes, are you guys entrepreneurs? And we're like, yep. Exactly what we are. We're entrepreneurs. And he goes, oh, well, you should check it out. It's great. The second floor is really nice. Third floor is a disaster. But the second floor, you could probably actually do something. Here's the keys. Go check it out. And we're like, awesome. So we go upstairs, and it's this great, the building it's the Myers building. It's downtown, right the epicenter of downtown Athens. It was 2 doors up from the famous Barnett's bookstore. It had everything in the world, a great bookstore and great magazine racks, and they had, all the music magazines, and it was like the epicenter of cool in town at the time. And this building was just empty, and so we found out the guy that owned it. There was this guy, Leonard's Losers, and Leonard's had this radio prognostication column, syndicated column all over the country called Leonard's Losers, and Leonard would predict not the winners of the game, but the losers of the game and why they would lose. And so I guess that made him different enough that he was able to get his own syndicated radio program across the country. And so he did all right. But his uncle, Frank, owned the building. And so we go, Bill and I search out Frank. We find him, we go to his house. And he's this old guy sitting in a chair. He's got an oxygen tank. And he's like smoking a cigar. And like, what do you kids want? We want to rent your building. And he goes, all right, $200 a month. We're like, okay, but listen, we want the third floor as well as the second floor. And he goes, that place is a wreck. And I said, tell you what, you'll rent us both floors for $200, and we'll leave the third floor in tenable condition when we leave. And he's like, ha, you kids are funny. All right, you got it. And he rents us both floors of this building for $200. And we're like, right on, great. So we move in, and first thing we do is we repaint the second floor. It had a toilet and a sink in it. That was it. And the third floor was nothing. I mean, it was just empty, completely empty space, and dirt, dust, dead pigeons, no electricity, no plumbing, no nothing. Perfect. We're like, this is great. We're going to live here. So we cleaned up the second floor, camped out there for a little while, realized we needed to get some income because it was, $200 a month. It seems like nothing for us. It was a ton of money. So yeah, we were flat broke. So anyway, we sublet the second floor to art students. Rented it out to art students for studio space, and then he and I moved upstairs, cleaned it all up, jacklegged in some plumbing and electricity in the most dangerous fashion you can imagine, and moved in. And so the second floor, we had art students, painters mostly, And so Michael, he was the cool kid that, he was way too cool for me. I didn't really know him. He was kind of a different little group of friends, and so does Michael and Randy rented that space. And at the time, Michael and Randy were both pretty fascinated with, the whole new music scene was just starting to bust all over, and it was happening worldwide. The whole music scene was just bubbling up, and there was just kind of an insistence that was happening in music all over the world, and it was, before internet, before cell phones, before all of that stuff, we got information word of mouth. Big whole 45s were being distributed by hand by people coming through town with a box of 45s. And so we saw magazines and fanzines and word of mouth. And it was just, there was an electricity behind all of this stuff, a real kind of like, this is happening and we need to be involved. So Michael and Randy decided, they were going to start a band because the B-52s had left town. The Bees, they were the band. They were the only band in town, and they left. And they were like, what are we going to do now? Who's going to do this? And so Michael and Randy gamely stepped up to the plate and said, all right, we'll do this. And they started kind of writing, and I say writing, it wasn't really writing songs as much as it was just, they were just noodling around. And originally it was going to be Michael on bass and Randy on drums, because Randy could play drums. And Michael chose bass because it had 4 strings, but they quickly learned the limitations of bass and drums. And so Randy decided, let's just pick up a guitar, right? It's just as easy as anything else. So he went out and got a guitar and learned how to tune it himself. Didn't, no instructions or anything, just tuned it up by what sounded good to him. And they started just noodling around on these songs. And at the time, DuPont had a weekend program where you could work 8-hour shifts on the weekend and make enough money to live all week. It was a pretty great gig for us. And Michael was really fascinated with all of the industrial rigidity of it all, and the order, and the attention to cleanliness and detail and safety, and all of the whole industrial ethic kind of blended in with his newfound love of craft work. Some of the music coming out of Europe at the time. And so he and Randy would sit there and just and just do these little riffs over and over and over and over. Just endless little riffs, but it's really soothing. It's kind of like having a machine running in the background that had a kind of a pleasant little rhythm going on, but a tone to it as well. And so, Bill and I would sit upstairs smoking pot, listening to them play music from the floor below. And we got to where we were pretty conversant in all of their songs. There was all the different versions of things that, we would critique them. Go, I like this one. This is a good one. I like that. Anyway, at some point, it just got to be so much. I went down and knocked on the door and said, can I play drums with you guys? And they're like, sure. So Randy had a set of drums out in the hallway, and I dragged him in, and we started playing. Then we actually had songs, and then we needed a singer. I tried Sam Seawright. That didn't work too good. Sam had this great, deep voice. But the reason we chose him was because he was a really good painter, and he also lived. He had the studio right behind Michael, so he was locally available. We tried Neil MacArthur. Neil he looked really good. He looked kind of like an English professor or something. He was also a good painter. He had the other studio over in the corner. So we tried everybody in the building, and it just didn't quite work out. So we had to kind of start casting a wider net. And that's when Randy suggested Vanessa.
And Randy came in to where I was working. I was working JCPenney in the catalog department, and one of my coworkers said, "Hey, there's this really cute guy out there that wants to talk to you." And I looked around the corner because I was on the phone with somebody, and said, "Oh, that's Randy." And I went out and talked to him, and he said, "Hey, we're starting a band. Would you like to come audition tonight?" And I thought about it, and I was like, well, I don't really have anything better to do. And so I came in, and it was the second floor of the Myers building. The room was dark except for a few lights, and they had a microphone set up, and there was an orange vinyl notebook set up on a music stand that had some lyrics already typed up inside. And so they were like, well, here you go. And I had never done anything like this.
Now, you had sung before at some point, like in a choir or something.
In the choir. I wasn't ever a soloist. but I sang, alto, and I was in the high school marching band, so
That's helpful.
gave me a solid sense of rhythm. They'd play a song, and then I would just try to make the words fit,
Well, and I got to interject here. The music and the words were never ever considered together. They were two completely separate things that didn't really have any bearing on one another. So she was given these words that weren't really made to fit these tonal patterns. And so she had to just jam them all in there as best she could fit. So you ended up with this pretty genius method. It's pretty amazing, but I couldn't hear it at all because it was so loud.
It was so loud, I don't think anybody could hear me.
I don't think you could hear it.
And they were like, okay, well, we'll let you know tomorrow. So I went home, and the next day Randy called me up and explained me the premise of the band. They had decided it was like an art project. It had like a goal.
Yeah, the rules.
And a beginning and an end. And the idea is that we would get to go to New York, play there, get written up in New York Rocker, and then disband. And to me, it didn't sound crazy at all because I've been an art student. What you do is you make work for a show, you show it, and then the show is over. And so we were pretty lucky. The third or fourth time we played out here, not too far from here in Oglethorpe County, the B-52s came and saw us. And they helped us get booked in New York. 2 or 3 weeks after they got me, we had a show. And people just stared at us.
Well, we didn't know how to do this either, so we had this very rigid set of and there was a really formula to this whole thing, and it was that this is what we were and how we were and how it's going to be, and it was very machine-like. Michael particularly was really fascinated with the whole machine-like aspects of this, and so he was trying not really to introduce humanity into this as much as just it was present this wall of sound. And so they, pretty much just stood there stock still. Nobody moved at all, and I'm back there. My inspiration of that day had been Keith Moon. I saw Keith Moon play when I was in high school. And for all of you younger than us, Keith Moon was the fantastic, bombastic, crazy drummer for The Who. And he kind of set the tone of how crazy drummers are supposed to be. He's the guy that threw the TV out the window of the hotel room. So he kind of was the model of insane drummers. And of course, that's what I saw. I was like, oh, I want to do that. He's just really flamboyant, athletic showmanship was, so I thought, I don't really know how to play drums, but I'll do the athletic showmanship part to make up for the fact that I don't really know how to do this. And so I'm at there, and Michael and Rainer are just like two statues, and she's in the middle trying to figure out what to do next. So she's reading her lyrics out of a notebook on a music stand. And so, of course, the audience is a little confused by all this. They're like,
especially after seeing the B-52s.
Yeah, who were
just left. We were nothing like that.
No, yeah, which I think that was also part of the thing, was to not consciously not be like them, because that was the real dangers coming out of Athens as being the other B-52s, the other band, that was a real danger too.
I thought maybe we were really horrible, but Dana Downs, he was in the Tone Tones, who opened that night, said that she thought we were really good. It was like standing inside of a big aircraft engine or something.
Which would have been the greatest compliment we could get. It sounded like a machine, like an engine. And you asked about how do we write. And we didn't really write so much as we just start noodling around. Somebody would have a riff. Maybe I'd do a beat. Randy would have a little, he'd have a little riff, or Mike would just start off with a bass line. And we would just riff on that over and over and over again until it started feeling like, well, it probably ought to go somewhere. This is another thing at the time. This is in the late 70s. For us, we played 5 times. 5 complete times we ever played at people's parties. And then we got an invite to go to New York. And so we booked a little mini tour. We opened up for the Gang of Four at Hurrah in New York.
And
Opened up for the Gang of Four, their very first show in the United States in Philadelphia, a place called the Hot Club. And then we were the headliners on a Friday night at the Rat in Boston, which was a venerated old punk club. And to us, it's just seemed like, oh, yeah, it's totally normal. That you would be a band that had 8 songs, had played 5 previous times at people's parties, and would be headlining a club in Boston. It's like, yeah, that's pretty normal. We just thought that was just, yeah, of course, that's what you do. And so, we ended up playing in New York. But wrote Glenn O'Brien wrote this amazing write-up about us and the Gang of Four, and he gave us as much column space as he did the Gang of Four. And we were like, wow, that's something else. So at some point we made a record, and that was the very first time I actually heard Vanessa singing. I'd never heard her singing before because it was always just this wall of sound, and she's up there, I could hear sounds, but I never actually heard singing. Still to this day, makes the hair stand up on my arms, is when we did Dub. And Dub was a complete, left field creation. We had 2 songs that we were going to play for our single. And we rehearsed, and boy, we were going to be the best ever. And we got into the studio, and we played these so well-rehearsed songs that they were dead. They came off lifeless. So we called up Danny and said, Danny, listen, he's our producer at the time, said, hey, we're going to scrap these 2 songs. We're going to play 2 brand new ones. We just wrote them, So we played Cool, and we were so excited about that. We nailed it in like 2 or 3 takes. It was like, oh, this is easy. Let's do another one. Let's do that brand new song that we've just been writing called Dub. And Dub was this thing that I don't think, other than Michael's 1 bass note and Randy's kind of berserk scratching on his guitar, that we had a plan for that. It didn't really have a structure. And did you make the words up right then on the spot?
Pretty much.
I think so. We played this thing, and pretty much that song that you hear on that record was pretty much invented live in the studio. We pretty much wrote it like right then while the tape was rolling. And that was the very first time I'd ever heard her singing. And she does this thing. She starts off, and a whispering thing goes into the scream. Blows my mind. I was just like, oh yeah, this is good. This is good. This is the real, this is why I joined this band to do this. And it's so fun when you hear something that you know is good when you do it. Many years later, we were in a 4th of July party. Mike Mills shows up, and they had just finished recording their record. And he goes, and he had, remember DAT tapes, this is the board tape that he got from the recording session. And he goes, hey, you want to hear my new song? It was like, sure, let's hear it. He puts it on, and it was The End of the World as We Know It. And he puts that song on, and we're like, oh yeah. And everybody starts dancing like mad. And we played it again, and we danced like mad, and played it again, and we danced and played and danced and played and danced. We probably played that thing 10 or 15 times in a row. And at some point I turned to Mike and I said, Mike, you're gonna be rich. Because they weren't yet. They were probably gold record status. And like my sister Rhett used to say, she says, with a gold record, you shop for new cars. With a platinum record, you shop for a house. So they were kind of car shopping status at the time. But this was like, oh boy. And I was like, Mike, you guys are going to be rich. And he looked at me and went, I know. And you hear a hit, you just go, oh yeah, that's a hit. And so I love those moments whenever we'd been in the studio and there was something that just clicked and it happened and it was right. It's great fun.
Decided to call it quits while it was so fun. R.E.M. had been talking to, I guess, you and Michael, and they said, we think the world might be ready for you now.
Well, they offered us their rehearsal space if we would get back together and try it again. And it's funny because I saw that by this time I'd gotten in the movie business. So now I'm in a whole different world where, I got this phone call from Michael. Michael calls up and says, hey, let's go get a beer sometime. How about Thursday night? Okay, 7 at the Blue. And I was like, oh, that's like a date. That's a meeting. Something's up. So I was like, oh boy, what's up? So I go, and we'd been broken up for, 4 or 5 years by now, I guess. And so at some point, so I see him at the Globe. He's at a table. I go get a beer, sit down, and sat down. The minute I sat down, I said, "Let me guess, you want to put the band back together?" Just joking. And he goes, "Well, to tell the truth, I've been talking to Randy." And I went, "Oh my God, really? You're kidding?" I was joking. He goes, No, we've been talking. We kind of miss it. Randy was really missing. We just want to do it just for fun. Just play just for fun. And would you be into that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would love to do that, but I'm in the movie business now. And so I got to tell you, when the phone rings, I leave. I go to wherever it is it takes me. And as long as y'all can work with that." And he says, "Yeah, we don't have any plans. We're not going to tour. We're not going to do any of that stuff. We just want to play and have fun." Like, that I can do. And so we got back together playing, rehearsing down at the R.E.M. studios, and told them to be tight-lipped about it. Don't tell anybody what we're up to, because we didn't want the added pressure of people expecting something. And we got together that first night to rehearse after having not played forever. And Michael comes in, and I was playing Bill's drums, because I don't even think I had drums at that time. And it was torture. It was just god awful. It was like, the Tin Man. Just like awful. And we just could barely get through any of this stuff. And I was like, "Michael, have you been playing your bass?" He goes, "Not at all." I said, "Where have you been keeping it?" He says, "It was under my bed for like 5 years. And when he pulled it out, he said it was furry, because it had so much stuff on there."
It had like an inch of dust on it.
And he pulled it out of retirement and, restrung the thing and played. But finally, we said, "All right, look, we cannot play in public until we can pull off one song." It was a song that we had written live on the spot in front of a paying crowd of people. And it was a train wreck, and we just collapsed and burned at the end. All right, so let's never, ever do that ever again. And after the show, Paul Bushert, who was doing sound for us, goes, "Hey, about that song you played," we're like, "Paul, we know. We're never doing that again. That was an abortion. We're never doing that again." He goes, "No, it was actually pretty good. I got it on tape." It was like, oh, God. So the next day we're driving in the van, and he plays it in the van, and we're like, "Oh, wait, that actually is kind of good."
Dissatisfaction, what? Let's take a look at that ink. B-L-O-T. I'm tired of moving my jaw. Gonna call my pa and ma.
It was really bizarre and weird. We had to learn how to play our own song. And so it was the most complicated song we had in our lineup. Everybody had their own chart to explain where they were in the song. It's like, mine just says bang, 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 bang. If you looked at two of them side by side and said, "What do these two things have to do with one another?" You'd look at them and go, nothing. There's nothing that either of these collections of words had to do with one another, except when Michael saw that one and Randy saw that one, they made sense and they could play this song. And so we finally, after about, 5 or 6 practices, we finally got it back together, and we played it. It was like nailed it. And we went, "Oh, we did it. We actually pulled it off." And then the phone rang. And I said, "Hey guys, I just got called to go on a show." They're like, "Oh, really? How long?" I said, "It's a television series. It's in Hawaii. It's going to take a while." It was Lost. It was the first season of Lost. So I said, "It's going to be, 5 months at least." "Oh, fuck. What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, you want to play live before we go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." So Michael called up Joey. "We play at your club." And he goes, "Sure. What are you thinking about?" He goes, "I don't know, Thursday." He goes, "Okay. Can I tell anybody?" Not yet. No, don't tell anybody yet. Finally, the word gets out. Somehow it got out. And, people showed up from all over. They came from
People started coming in from Tennessee. And
North Carolina, driving in from all over the place. And
WUOG went off the air so that the people who were the DJs there could come to the show.
And it was just, out the street, and the place was just going off. If you were to select all of the shows that we ever did, that would be my number one top pick of all of them, just because it was one of those magic nights where nothing could go wrong. Where it's just, and sometimes when I'm playing, to me it's a little bit like an athletic event, because I'm just, back there slamming drums. And I'll try things. I'll try moves or little fills or drum rolls or something. Probably less than half the time I'll pull it off. I just could not miss that night. We were on fire, and the whole room was just bouncing up and down, street, all the way out the street. It was what an awesome show. And then I left the next day to go to Hawaii and didn't come home for 5 months. But that was our last incarnation. That little
The third time,
the third time was the charm. Yeah, we had broken up. That was the big one, and so I ended up getting a job in the film industry, and that was one of those, this is something I can do for a little while. And that was 30 years ago. It just kind of kept going and going and going. So that's what I do now. I'm a construction coordinator in the film industry. So we build sets for movies, and just finished one recently, about 4 weeks ago, just finished one.
We're lucky to get you, Curtis. He hardly ever does podcasts.
This is the first one I've ever done, so.
In 2020, we put out a box set, which I was really, really proud of. It has our first 2 albums, Gyrate and Chomp, an album called Extra that has all of the singles that did come out on an album, plus alternate versions of different songs, and then something called Raz Tape, which was actually our first recording that was done with the Tascam by Chris Rasmussen. That's why it's called Raz Tapes. And it was done in our studio, the Myers building, in the fall of 1979, before we went into the studio to record our first single. The first pressing sold out. Actually, the color vinyl sold out pre-orders in 2.5 days. And I was like, Brady Brock is executive producer, and he also works for New West Records as the vice president. And he was like, that's phenomenal. That would be phenomenal if the Rolling Stones sold out their box set in 2.5 days. You don't understand.
Yeah, well, we had a little congratulations get-together party after the box set came out. And I was talking to Brady, and Brady goes, "Oh, you don't understand." He says, "I was hanging on by a thread there." He said, "I was about to get fired. When they put this box set out, it got bigger and more expensive, and everything about it kept getting more and more exotic, and the multiple color details, and the book on the inside is just like
200-page hardback book
with 4-color images, and beautiful. The whole thing is such a gorgeous package. And of course, it cost a bunch of money, and the record company was out they were on the hook for this. They're like, and they're going to Brady, this had better make money. This could sink us. And he goes, it's going to be fine. He's just hoping it was going to be fine. He hoped, he thought it was going to be fine. Everybody believes it's going to be fine, but that's the whole nature of all of this. You throw the dice and hopefully it comes up. We put it out right on the eve of the pandemic, which was perfect timing. And, everybody gets shut down in their homes, and they get sent a stimulus check from the government. So what do? They buy our box set, and it sold out just like that. And Brady was just like, I was sweating bullets there. He says, I was right on the edge of, losing my job and getting fired for this. But, it all came out well. So we were super, super proud of that thing.
Jason NeSmith, who works with me on PYLON Reenactment Society, he's a certified audio engineer. He studied at the Berkeley School of Music, and he does mastering at Chase Park Transduction. He came in, didn't know what he was getting into at the time, but started gathering tapes together. The actual magnetic part of the tape was starting to come off. There's just like something about that era tape that they have this problem, with that they just disintegrate. And so he said he got the tapes just in time. What he had to do was he actually had to bake them in an oven to make them at a certain temperature for a certain number of hours, and then immediately go and take them off and put them on another reel. It's just a miracle that he said that he got the tapes just in time. Otherwise, all of those mixtapes would have been, the material on them would have been lost. So now they're digitized, and he's maintaining an archive. Bill Levinson, he was a box set guru to come and kind of guide us through the process of marketing that. He's a guy who did Eric Clapton's Crossroads, and he did VU by the Velvet Underground. He's a well-known box set producer, and he came and helped us for nothing. And then we got Mitch Easter sent us some tapes, and then he talked to Gary Smith about an album called Chain, which he could just find a DAT for. The tapes have been lost, so that's why it wasn't in the box set. And on the other side, there was this guy named Henry Owings. He worked more on the vision side, and he worked closely with Michael to recreate the artwork, Chomp and Gyrate, which had been lost, and also worked on the book.
We even put out cassette tapes, and it came with a pencil, PYLON pencil. And I was like, why the pencil? Well, duh, you gotta rewind the tape when it gets out of there, Remember old cassette tapes? They get all strung out, and you take a pencil, stick it in there, it's like, comes with a free rewinding pencil.
And a button.
So what kind of advice do you have for others that are maybe in a band wanting to start playing out and maybe make a living in the music industry?
At some point, whether we liked it or not, we were just art students. And we did everything we possibly could to avoid business. And you can't. Well, you can, but you just gotta let somebody take advantage of you forever and ever and ever. And it gets tiresome. After a while, you would like to see, some money from the records you sell. You'd like to know how many records you sold. It'd be nice to know these things.
There's a group about this big who are people who might make $5, when they play. And then there's a group of people about this big that can actually sort of almost make an income or a living off of it. And they usually have to add to it doing different things like also giving music lessons or playing, as a studio musician. And then there's a really tiny group of people that make most of the money. And unfortunately, the industry is set up to reward these people up here. But there are people who are willing to support independent musicians through things like Bandcamp. Now, 4,000 plays might get you $1.27. I mean, I'm just serious. Yeah, don't give up, and don't sign away your publishing.
Yeah. We still do occasionally get BMI royalty checks, Broadcast Music International, and it's for any time your music gets played in a public way, like radio traditionally, movie soundtracks, all that kind of stuff. So it has the breakdown of where the income comes from. Thailand. 1 cent. Republic of South Korea, -1 cent. I'm like, how do you get a negative value? And we were all just like, we got a -cent. We owe them money. We got to send a penny to South Korea. And at some point, it was like, oh, I know what it is. They're playing our songs backwards, listening for some messages. That's got to be what it is. I had always said, look, as soon as my BMI check gets less than the postage, that's when I'm framing it. Hasn't happened yet. They're still coming in. We still get them every now and then. I got one the other day, as a matter of fact.
Our bigger money makers, so to speak, is R.E.M. recording Crazy.
you got to diversify. You got to put out different products. You got to pay attention to the financials. In order to pay attention to it properly, you need somebody who has legal training to do that, because otherwise you're going to get eaten alive. So you need a lawyer. It wouldn't hurt to have a publicist. And then the last part of it, and the most important part of it, is you have to like one another. I think the whole thing should really be based on friendship at some point, because you got to get along together. And then if you get those things together, then you can start writing music. That's the easy part.
Yeah.